When you're watching Thor, Love and Thunder, I have to say, this movie is kind of a mixed bag for me. On the one hand, I do kind of like I like the comedy. I like the action, and I really like some of the rock and roll aesthetic behind it. That's pretty fun. But what I don't like is the inconsistency and the emotional changes or the overall balance of tone. There's it's so hard to get a right balance of like the comedy, the action, the adventure, and then the romance, and then the mystery and the evil about like Gore the God Butcher. I have to say, Christian Bale did a phenomenal job as Gore the God Butcher. I think his character was straightforward and consistent throughout the whole movie, and it's more so like Chris Hemsworth as Thor that's a bit more wishy-washy, you know? And I gotta say, if the movie was more like him with the Guardians of the Galaxy going on adventures from planet to planet and doing stuff like that, I think that would have been a lot more, it would have been a lot more fun and not as, obviously it wouldn't have been as, whatchamacallit. It wouldn't have felt like as serious as they started it, because the beginning of the film, we meet Gore the God Butcher, or just Gore at that point, who was like following the God of Light or whoever it was, and whatever. What I'm trying to say is that the movie started off in one tonal direction of like, it's really serious, and it felt like a character that was on his way to a vengeance path, you know what I mean? And it felt very theater-like. It felt like Shakespearean, Greek tragedy kind of a vibe, you know what I mean? And now he's on this global conquest or this global vengeance path to kill all gods, and gaining the new strength of the Necro Sword. So I really liked the opening of it. It set up his character very well. What didn't work for me was that immediately after that, it was all happy, fun smiles and stuff. And not that that's bad, but like if they had established that that was kind of like the direction of the movie, I guess, or I guess the trailer set that up, but it felt like complete day and night between what we saw at the beginning of the movie and what we led up to. Is more comedy, more humor, more Thor Ragnarok style, and I don't know, the balance of it just wasn't hitting, you know what I mean? It wasn't flowing properly. It felt like it would be really happy and exciting and like humorous, and like at times they would try too much for the humor. It was a bit over the top, but then it would get really down low and serious. And in those serious moments, I liked it a lot more. I liked it a lot more tonally for Thor and for Jane and Valkyrie, and like the situation that they get put in going up against Gore the God Butcher. I felt like that stuff really, really worked out, And so this one is just like all over the place, I feel. It's like it's a romance film with Jane and Thor, and then it's a self-identity or like figuring out oneself kind of a story for Thor. And then it's like children are kidnapped, and it's a vengeance story for Gore the God Butcher. And then the next minute it's like, I don't know, dude, it's going up and down and left and right. And I feel like if they had stayed along the path with the Guardians of the Galaxy, I really like the collaboration. I think that's really fun. Obviously, I think I'm really happy with their screen time. I feel like they got in and they got out, and it was just the right enough for them, and just like the wrong amount for like, I guess the kind of movie that Taika Waititi and everybody else was like going for. So I don't know. It felt more like they wanted to. It felt more like it needed to be that kind of adventure action comedy movie than it did the romantic and self-reflecting, self-identity, and vengeance story that it also was. So it had a lot of ideas that it threw into the pot, and it was hard for them to like stand on one flavor, one flavor of like the soup. You know what I mean? One second it's like really savory, and then the next it's like sweet, and then again it's like salty. I don't know. And the taste, the flavor of it just wasn't balancing altogether. It was just they were throwing everything into the soup, and they were like, "All right, this is the movie." It felt a bit scatterbrained. It was here, it was there, and the comedy was a bit too much. Sometimes it was just like they were trying way too hard to make it funny, trying way too hard to make it like, I don't know. It felt like too much. And then those screaming goats. Oh my gosh, those screaming. I mean, one goat does a scream, and all of a sudden it's like every goat, every animal has to like have a scream in the film. Like, come on, it was one joke. It was funny for a time. It doesn't work anymore. Like it just felt like a bit much. But whatever. Who knew that one goat would have such a huge impact on pop culture and media? So, but anyways, going back to like the Guardians of the Galaxy and Thor, like at the beginning of the movie, like I feel like if they had focused or started off with that and then led into Gord the God Butcher, I feel like that would have been a lot more. Like we first are established that Gord the God Butcher has the Necro Sword, and then we get a flashback later in the movie of like how he ended up this way. You know what I'm saying? And then so on and so forth from that. Because then we get a little inside look into his backstory. If you start off the film like that, it makes it feel like the tone of the story is like always going to be like that, but then it completely shifts into the comedy, the humor, the action, like, it goes wishy-washy, and it doesn't feel as good. You know what I mean? I don't know. I always think that okay, there's like Avengers Infinity War starts off with Thanos going after the Tesseract when he already has the Power Stone, right? But for this movie, it's like he's just getting the Necro Sword. And there's a lot of similarities between Gore and Thanos. But, Gore is going after vengeance while Thanos is really going after destiny, I guess, or his, like, path, whatever. But they're similar in that way, where the beginning of the story is tonally set as, kind of dark and kind of like the bad guy going on his path of destruction or going to achieve their goals, going after their goals, you know what I mean? And what's interesting is that in both of these movies, we see Gord the God Butcher actually, he also succeeds the same way Thanos succeeds, in that Thanos snaps or gets all the Infinity Stones and wipes out half the universe, whereas Gord the God Butcher finally gets to eternity and gets the opportunity to get something else, I don't know. I think that there's some similarities there, but whereas Avengers Infinity War has a lot more urgency to it, and the action is still there, there's still a sprinkle of comedy in there, you know what I mean? It's not too much, whereas with Thor Love and Thunder, it's just a bit too much, too heavy on the comedy, But I don't know. I think that maybe, just maybe, it can be like, I mean, they have some pretty good bits, I think that there's some hilarious moments in there. It's just that when they linger a little too much on it is when it starts to become a problem, But hey, that's just me. And then I want to talk about Jane Foster. Natalie Portman coming back was a big surprise, and do I think that the movie could have benefited without her being there? Yes and no. I think that she serves as a good way for Thor to develop, especially when the relationship didn't really get any quote unquote closure, right? Like, not in the audience's eyes, but it did feel like them coming together and being able to communicate or talk to each other or be able to, like, I don't know, rekindle. It works. It does work because they've been together since the first Thor movie, right? And for her to be missing or for her to be out of it, it just kind of like it sinks down a bit. And so I don't know. It works, but it doesn't work. And if she's not in the movie, then I feel like there's still a lot of story in Thor: Love and Thunder. But without her, but with her, it still flows kind of the same way. And I think the theme of being loved or having someone to love or really feeling bad or like having that feeling of like, that's why I really like what Peter Quill said to Thor earlier in the movie is that like that bad feeling or that negative feeling that you have after like going through something awful, you know what I mean? Like he did with Gamora is way better than not feeling anything at all, And so that's kind of like a really big point for Thor and learning is that like he can't close himself off to his friends or to romance. He needs those negative emotions and feelings in order to truly say that he had something beautiful and he loved and he had someone. And if he's going to feel bad about anybody or like feel bad about being in love with someone, then Jane should be that woman, And I thought that was really cool. But I did happen to like the direction they did with Natalie Portman and having her be Lady Thor, I thought that was a great idea. What I think was missing in that was like how she gets cancer. I feel like the cancer could have been an effect from her being exposed, her whole body being exposed to the ether. So in Thor: The Dark World, she was exposed to the ether and it was in her body. And at the time they extracted it from her or like it was removed from her body. So we thought everything was okay. But after all of these years later, it developed and it gave her the cancer. You know what I mean? So that could have been more of I definitely think that could have been the reason why she got it. I thought that could have been I felt like that was kind of like a straight shot, like a straight line of like connection is like the ether infected her and now she has cancer and Thor could feel like some guilt behind, being with her in the first place. But again, that goes back to like, well, he still loves her and they did it because it happened whether or not he was involved or not. It's just, I don't know, I just feel like the ether would have been the best explanation why she got sick, why she got cancer. But, I guess her having a history of cancer, her mom having cancer before her, is also also kind of works for her, I don't know. And then I kind of like how Thor and Jane reconnected or are able to have the moment of like, of love or romance, however brief it is. I think it's, I don't know, I like them together. I think they pair well together. I think Natalie Portman and Chris Hemsworth have great chemistry. I think that they played their roles and they were fun together in the movie, I wish I just saw more of them, connecting and stuff. So this was it. This was them connecting and really bonding together and having some fun romance bits in there. I thought it was good. And so, essentially, Gore the God Butcher is going around murdering gods, and they brought Lady Sif back. So I thought that was a huge W. I really like Jamie Alexander. I remember there was like a time she was like the big, kind of like a big deal. She was like doing the show. I remember watching her on the show where she has her whole body covered in tattoos. Man, I forget the name of that show, but her whole body is covered in tattoos. And she has no idea who she is or how she got all the tattoos. But each tattoo is like a clue to another, like, mystery or like a murder or a criminal action that's going to take place, like a terrorist or this or that. And she's working with the FBI or the CIA or whoever to investigate all of it. And the more and more they look at it, or the more and more that each tattoo that they look at, it's another case and another this and another that. And she's like also very combat savvy, so she's out in the field too, and it's all cool. And so that mixed with like some other movies that she was doing, it was a big deal. And so when she didn't come back for Thor Ragnarok, I was like, oh, where is she? I thought that was a waste. But then they brought her back, and I thought that was really cool. So shout out to her, Lady Sif, back in action. And then Gore the God Butcher attacks New Asgard and starts kidnapping the children. And now it's up to Thor and Valkyrie and Lady Thor, Jane, to go save them. And again, it's a serious situation. The children are kidnapped, they're scared, they're frightened, and then Thor is just behaving like Thor is just kind of like making comedy out of it. And it just didn't work for me. It fell flat. It was just like, I get what they're trying to do. They're trying to add some humor to it. This is a serious situation. It doesn't work for me. I was watching it and I was like, they're trying too hard for the comedy. It's like, he needs to be a strong leader and give them assurance, And so, New Asgard is attacked and they fight Gore the God Butcher, and they realize that he has the Necro Sword and that he can kill gods. So Thor, Valkyrie, and Jane are like, all right, and Korg. I don't want to forget Korg. Korg is in there. And they're like, okay, we need to raise an army if we're going to defeat him and get the Necro Sword and destroy it and defeat him and get the children back. We have to raise an army over at Omnipotent City is what it's called. It's Omnipotent City, and it's the city of the gods with Zeus and Hercules and whatever. You know what I mean? It's all the other gods that are in mythology. So with that, I feel like that was a more clever tie-in to Gore the God Butcher and the comedy aspect than Thor himself. You know what I mean? At the beginning of the film, it was Gore, and then it went over to Thor, and it was kind of like a huge shift in tone. Whereas the Omnipotent City is the direct line between Gore the God Butcher's actions that lead straight to Thor. You know what I'm saying? So it feels like it's a bit more of a cleaner line that way, as opposed to, this is Gore the God Butcher, and then let's take a look at our old buddy Thor. You know what I'm saying? So maybe if they had introduced that line earlier, or what they should have done is that once they decided to go to Omnipotent City to deal with this Gore the God Butcher, they cut over to Gore the God Butcher's backstory, and then they cut over to them being in Omnipotent City and seeing the direct line that way. I don't know. But Omnipotent City, they show up and they start figuring out, okay, how are we going to get in touch with Zeus? And basically ask everybody to join in an army against Gore the God Butcher. He'll kill all of us, you know? And so again, it's a comedic moment. They're sneaking in and they're going to ask for help, but at the same time, I don't know. At times it went a little too far. Whatever. I thought there was a funny bit where Russell Crowe, who's playing Zeus, he steps out of his like throne or his chamber or whatever, and he lifts up like his little skirt, like his little like tutu, and then he steps down the stairs all elegant like. I thought that was hilarious. I thought that was a really funny bit. Now some people criticize the accuracy of Zeus or like Russell Crowe's depiction. He's not like this ripped god or whatever, but he's more so like this lazy, showboating coward, I guess. And I feel like that's also pretty accurate to Zeus, you know? So, I don't know. It works, it doesn't work. I get the concept and I like it. I'm just not like crazy. I'm just not like, I don't care, you know what I mean? It's like, it's Zeus, you know? There are other media depictions of Zeus that are a lot more to my liking, and this one's just more of like a comedic and just like, it's just another depiction of Zeus. It doesn't really, you know, it doesn't really affect me. It doesn't really bother me, you know? I'm not like, oh, it has to be this muscle-ripped and super strong Zeus that's like an elegant and all-powerful god. It's like, no, he could be fat and lazy and like showboating and like talking about orgies and whatnot. Like, I'm fine with that. Like, it's just their depiction of it. It's just for laughs. It's just, who cares, you know? There's other better depictions of Zeus that I like more and that, you know, I don't need to fight for that. It's already there. It's already existed, you know? So whatever, who really cares? It doesn't bother me. So then Thor approaches Zeus and asks him that he needs help. He needs an army to fight Gore the God Butcher. And Zeus says, no, Gore the God Butcher can't kill anybody. He's just another guy who will kill weaker and weaker gods, and it doesn't matter. And Thor is kind of like, we've fallen. When did it become about like orgies and us just like doing nothing? People need us. And Zeus is like, all he has is the Necro Sword. He can't use that. He doesn't have the key to get to eternity. And at eternity, he can make this huge wish and do whatever he wants. So, blah. I also liked the fight between Thor, Valkyrie, Jane, and everybody against those gold soldiers or guys, where they're like fighting them and they're doing like, it's just a cool action sequence. I thought that was cool. And then they steal Zeus's thunderbolt, and then that's going to be their new weapon to fight the that's a new weapon or a new added addition to fighting Gore the God Butcher. And so Jane has Mjolnir, which is like broken into multiple pieces. And I thought it was really creative the way that they used broken Mjolnir, how it like breaks off, it can hit multiple opponents, and how it can like come back together again and rebuild itself into the hammer, into the hilt, or whatever, into the, what's it called? The grip of it, you know? I thought that was cool. And so then I really like the action sequence over in I don't know what the planet's called. It's like Gore the God Butcher's planet. It's like the gray paradise or the gray planet. Basically, it's where everything's black and white. And yeah, I like that. I also thought it was funny that they landed on the planet and it was like, it looked a lot bigger, but it was actually small. You know, they landed. It's like the size of the moon or something. It's like really small. And then Jane figures out the key and she throws Stormbreaker away. And I thought, I did like the bit where Stormbreaker is like jealous of Thor and his like desire for Mjolnir and stuff like that. You know, I thought that was, it had some good comedic moments. Just kind of like a little like, what's it called? Like object jealousy. I thought that was funny. And then finally, when they fight against Gore the God Butcher in there, and they use like Thunderbolt, Valkyrie gets stabbed, Jane's medical cancer is getting worse because she's using Mjolnir, like it's not allowing her to fight the cancer. And so now Thor has to go save the children alone without Valkyrie, who's injured, and Jane, who's sick. And I really like the moments between Jane and Thor. I think those quiet moments where they could really be passionate and really like have those honest conversations with each other. I feel like that's where Thor really shined the most. More than the comedy, more than the action, it's his ability to like show that emotion. And I think Chris Hemsworth does a great job with the emotion. I think he's a really great at being in love and like talking and those quiet moments where they can like really talk to each other and express themselves to one another. I feel like those were the best moments. And so Thor goes after the children and he gives them all like powers to all of his limited time Thor powers to fight Gore the God Butcher and his like shadow monsters and whatnot. And then Thor fights Gore, but Gore's stronger than Thor, or he's like beating Thor. He's not able to like defeat him. So then Jane shows up and she chooses to fight in the end. And so essentially Jane dies in Thor's arms as Gore the God Butcher enters eternity, and Thor and Gore are able to have a heart-to-heart about love, about how all they both wanted, how everybody wants to just be loved. And I feel like if that was more of the center point, I understand it's like the theme of the movie. It is a center point, but it also felt like a second point to the action and the comedy and all of that stuff. I feel like they went so heavy with the comedy, it didn't have all of the substance it needed for that moment. And so when it came, it was like, this is what the movie needed. This is what that movie really, really craved, And so Jane dies in Thor's arms, and Gore the God Butcher uses the wish to bring back his daughter who died at the beginning of the film. And so he does that. But now Gore the God Butcher is dying without the Necro Sword because Jane destroyed it in their fight. And so Gore the God Butcher is dying without the Necro Sword, without the curse that's like keeping him alive or keeping him going. He's dying. And so Jane's dying. And all that's going to be left is Gore the God Butcher's daughter, his love, and now Thor being able to live by Jane's wishes and being able to take care of love. So Thor gets an adopted daughter. And now I don't like this decision. I hate this decision. It just doesn't work. I don't get why Gore the God Butcher couldn't stay alive and Jane be the only one that loses. You know what I mean? It's like, It's like Thor keeps on losing, but now this death has propelled him into like keep on feeling, you know what I mean? Not gain a daughter. You know what I mean? I think that Gore the God Butcher deserves a happy ending. He deserves his oasis, his paradise, And with that, Thor could probably get his too. Obviously not with Jane, but with somebody, right? So that's the thing. You know what I'm saying? And it just, the adopted daughter thing, it doesn't work for me. I don't like it. I don't like it at all. Maybe I can get on board with it over time, but I just don't like the decision. It doesn't feel good, like at all. So I don't know. But I I do think that I think it's a direction that Thor could have gone in, but it just doesn't work without Jane being a part of the picture or him gaining it organically. He's gaining it for basically nothing. I mean, he doesn't. I don't know. It it doesn't work for me. All right, that's it. That's it. So, anyways, Thor gets a daughter, and now they're working together to fight evil that's out there, and that's the end of the movie. And she's love, and he's thunder, and that's the end of the movie. And so next we see that Zeus is still alive after Thor threw Thunderbolt straight through his chest. He survived it somehow. He's a god. Well, he's a god. How about that? And Zeus is now sending Hercules after Thor. So they haven't done anything with that. So who knows what that's going to be. And then the end credit scene, the after credit end credit scene is Jane showing up in Valhalla. She meets Heimdall, and she's now there amongst the gods. And that's a cool ending for her, you know? So that's the end of the movie. And again, there's some good moments and there's some bad moments. There's some ideas that I wish that were throughout the whole movie, and there are some ideas that I wish that they pulled back on or showed some restraint on. You know, it just whatever. This is what happens, and I'm kind of okay with it. You know, I'm not saying it's like the worst Marvel movie, but it's definitely like a bit of a disappointment, you know? So, I don't know. I think that it has some great sequences, good action in it. Comedy is a bit much, but there are some good, funny moments in there. And I just, when the story gets serious, when the story gets tonally focused and more romantic with Jane and Thor, or more serious with Gore the God Butcher and the children being kidnapped, like I feel like that's where the story gets a lot stronger, as opposed to the comedy and the action carrying the movie, you know? So, I don't know. It either hits you or it misses you, and I'm just getting grazed by it. You know what I mean? It slightly missed me, but it also kind of hit me. You know what I mean? So it grazed me. This movie is just okay in my opinion. So, but there's some good moments, and I kind of like it. So, all in all, it's an okay movie. If it's not your cup of tea, if you think it's a bit like too much on the comedy, I agree with you. If you think that it's like a bad Marvel movie, I'm not gonna hate it. You know what I mean? I'm not gonna be like, oh no, it's a great Marvel movie. It's just okay to me, you know. So that's just it. And is it rewatchable? Kind of. I guess certain moments. I wouldn't mind rewatching certain moments on like YouTube. You know what I mean? But other than that, nah. The whole story again? Nah, I don't think so. But it's pretty good. So it's okay. It's okay. But yeah. Anyways, thank you guys so much for listening. I'll talk to you guys all next time. Thank you.